Hello and welcome to our weekly look inside Syria. I'm Hazem Seeker. Well, this week we focus on the battle for a strategic town on the border with Lebanon. The town of El Qusair has been under rebel control for more than a year, but in recent days forces loyal to the Syrian government have made gains in their efforts to take it back. El Qusair is important because it's on a road linking the capital Damascus to the coast. And now there are growing concerns that the fighting threatens to engulf neighboring Lebanon. Zaina Khodr has more.
This was not just another battle. The objective of the Syrian army was clear: to cut off a supply route used by the opposition. State television showed pictures of its forces in control of Ataibi, a strategic town east of Damascus. It lies on the approaches to the capital. The opposition did say it was a major setback, especially since rebel forces have recently made territorial gains around their ultimate target, Damascus. They may lose more territory in the capital suburbs. There seems to be a massive campaign to repel rebel advances near the capital. Securing the coastal regions means the government needs to take control of Qusair, a rebel stronghold along Lebanon's northeastern border. The army has stepped up airstrikes in this strategically important area. It is not only a transit point for the opposition to send weapons and supplies into Syria, but it lies on a highway that connects Damascus to the coast, a government stronghold. The opposition says the battle for Qusair is not being led by Syrian government forces, but Hezbollah, a Lebanese Shia group, an adamant supporter of President Bashar al-Assad. So far, the army may have won some battles in their counter-offensive to secure areas ringing the capital, and the push is continuing. Some of the heaviest fighting is in Jubair, considered a fault line on the doorstep of the heart of Damascus. This new strategy may ensure control over strategic territories, but it may not be enough to bring about an outright victory. Zaina Khodr for Inside Syria.
Also this week, accusations from both sides in Syria about the use of chemical weapons. Now, the United States says it has intelligence to suggest the Syrian government may have been using them against rebels. US President Barack Obama says if there is strong enough evidence of chemical warfare in Syria, it could force a serious reevaluation of the conflict.
It's obviously horrific as it is when mortars are being fired on civilians and people are being indiscriminately killed. To use potential weapons of mass destruction on civilian populations crosses another line with respect to international norms and international law. And that is going to be a game changer.
Well, joining us now to discuss all this in Beirut, Ilyas Hanna, defense analyst and a retired Lebanese general. In Washington, D.C., Nicholas Heras, author and Middle East analyst at Jamestown Foundation. Also in Beirut, Kamel Wazni, a political analyst. And Mr. Wazni is also founder and director of the Center for American Strategic Studies in Beirut. And joining me here in the studio, we have Saleh Mubarak, a member of the Syrian National Council and a professor at Qatar University. Welcome, all three of you. Let's start then with the issue of chemical weapons in Syria. And if I could start with you, Nicholas Heras. President Obama has said that any chemical weapons being used in this conflict would be a potential game changer. But the administration has also been very careful to say that the evidence at this point is not conclusive. What is your view?
I believe that the Obama administration is being very careful not to overplay the chemical weapons issue at the moment, that they'll be looking for systematic use of chemical weapons. There's a lot of question as to what exactly occurred in Khan al-Assal, and there was a lot of confusion as to whether the chemical weapons that were being used were chlorine gas from opposition members, potentially Jabhat al-Nusra, or if it was in fact the Syrian military that used sarin gas. At this point in time, I think they'll be looking for systematic use of chemical weapons. And if there is evidence of systematic use, then they will reassess the situation and be more aggressive in their posture towards the al-Assad government.
Ilyas Hanna, the specter of the invasion of Iraq, which led to an 8-year war that killed tens of thousands of Iraqis and more than 4,000 US soldiers, that's obviously looming very large on any decision that President Obama makes in Syria.
Yes, I think that this administration will not really have boots on the ground, as we say. But the chemical weapon in Syria if the regime, so far it's not really confirmed, if the regime really used it, it was used in a smart way, in for two purposes. First, to attract the attention of the concerned countries, which is the United States of America and Israel, because it was considered as red line. The second one, keeping in the regime's hand the possibility of the denial, that we didn't use it yet. So maybe it was a test in order to really shake a new or create new dynamics for what's happening in Syria, to bring this international, organization, United Nations or USA, into the table in order to discuss the situation in Syria. But yes, I do agree with your guest in Washington. Yes, it's not a systematic use. It's not really institutionalized as use on the ground.
Kamal Wazni, what are the implications of all this to you?
Obviously, the administration is very cautious about pointing at Syria, at the regime at this point. I don't think the United States, it's in best interest to enter in any confrontation with the Syrian regime. I think there's indication that there's division within the U.S. administration between the Republican, between the Israeli lobby within the U.S. Congress, and Mr. Hagel, the defense minister, and the Obama administration. This has been the issue with the Obama administration, not now, before a few months we heard the details that the administration is divided between the ex-CIA director Petraeus and Mr. Obama about how they can handle the situation in Syria. Obviously, the United States is very concerned about the extremist element, about al-Nusra, this Al-Qaeda front, because they feel this is an imminent threat and they cannot take it under consideration. And they know very well any attack in Syria, this is going to bring the whole Middle East into war, and it's going to bring the Iranian and bring everybody into the table. I don't think the United States is ready for a war in that large scale at this point. So I think they can wait and they can play it out. And I don't think the Syrians are using chemical weapon at this point.
Saleh Mubarak, President Obama has also in the past talked about chemical weapons being a red line that cannot be crossed. And I appreciate that as a member of the Syrian National Council, you value whatever support you can get from the United States at this point. But I have to ask you, if this is a red line that cannot be crossed, then why is 70,000 people killed so far in Syria not a red line?
Well, first of all, the number of deaths, we believe, has exceeded 100,000. And that's precisely the point, what you just mentioned. It's not the method, it's the fact that they are being killed. So it is a red line to use chemical weapons, which we agree with. It's a red line, but is it a green line to kill with cluster bombs, barrel bombs, face bombs, Scud missiles? It's kill scores of people with other means, killed by butchering them, by burning them alive, women and children. It's unbelievable that the world community is silent and is waiting. And it's even this red line, as your guest from Washington, first Obama said the use of chemical weapons is a red line. Now we're hearing the word systematic. Maybe the third step is large scale. Well, if it's limited scale, it's okay. If it's not, well, the fact of the matter, every day we talk, there's 150, 200 people, innocent Syrians are killed by this brutal regime. The other day, last week, 500 people were killed in Judaydat al-Fadl in Syria in one massacre. So what are we waiting for?
Ilyas Hanna, let's move on then to the issue of El Qusair and how strategic that town is for both sides in this conflict. And I want to start by asking you then, Ilyas, how important is El Qusair to both sides here?
I think when you look at this region, it is about geography, it's about topography, as well as demography. You have like 24 villages, half of them are Shia, which is, the umbrella or the rhetoric of Hezbollah that he's defending the Shia. And this may contradict the beliefs of Hezbollah, that his resistance against Israel. This is one point. When you talk about geography and topography, when you look at the highway that really relates or links Dar'a to Damascus, to Homs, Homs is the most critical node of Syria today. It's the linchpin, it's the axis of Syria. So now when you look at this region, it is like the backyard of the regime, the backyard of the center of gravity of Damascus. So it has to be secured. having this area secured means that the backyard of the regime or the capital is secure, as well as Homs will be under the regime's control, because if Homs falls, Syria will be divided into 4 areas: north, south, east, and west. And then they will lose the link between Damascus, the center of gravity. This area, we call it the Al-Asi Valley, or this corridor. And then the coastal area where you have the majority are Alawi. So I think that this area is highly important. It needs to be cleared. It needs to be secure for the regime in order to have, in the worst case scenario, we call it the strategic withdrawal from Damascus, something like that. Because this area, what is going in this area is going as well in some places, around the Rif Dimashq. So it's like, one point within maybe grander strategy that we are going to see in the future. And maybe we'll see a lot of fighting in the coming days in Homs.
Nicholas Harris, when you see these reports of Hezbollah sending fighters into Syria to bolster the Syrian government's fight against the rebels, what does it tell you?
I think it depends a lot upon what we define as escalation. The reports of Hezbollah being involved in the Syrian civil war have been ongoing from opposition sources since, well, the start of the civil war. Before the fall, the late summer and the fall of 2012, a lot of these reports had to do with Hezbollah sniper teams, Hezbollah reconnaissance teams, Hezbollah special forces, if you will. Then into the late summer, early fall of 2012, you begin to hear reports, especially in the area, the diverse area west of Al-Qusair, where you have Shiites, you have Christians, you have some Alawites, you have some Sunni, forming popular committees against what they called Takfiri Salafist militants. And that gave Hezbollah an opportunity where you have Lebanese Shiites that are in these villages that border the areas of Lebanon, that border these villages, to come in and to form, if you will, an almost Green Beret type of counterinsurgency role to help support these popular committees of locals. And then from there, the escalation became fiercer. You have reports of Al-Farouk, brigades, the Syrian opposition group, the FSA, later Jabhat Nusra, targeting what they claimed were Hezbollah trainers, targeting Hezbollah fighters. And it's escalated from there. This recent conflict is interesting and potentially very dire for the Syrian civil conflict, because if Hezbollah is being used as an actual division of the Syrian army, as reports indicate, that the Syrian Air Force is providing them with air cover, and that they are forming a shock troop to try to clear Qusair, and then, as has been reported by some opposition media, then to go to Idlib and then to go further afield, that would represent a severe escalation of the conflict from serving as a Green Beret type of role with counterinsurgency to actually fighting in the conflict directly with the Syrian military.
Kamel Wazni, Lebanon unfortunately has its own history of civil war. Is there not a danger that this will stoke further tensions beyond Syria's borders?
Well, obviously, this is Lebanon have no interest in entering any war with Syria or enter inside the conflict. But we have to remember, we have Lebanese town inside Syria border, and those Lebanese town came under attack from the opposition. And I think the Lebanese mobilize and they defend themselves. Beyond that, I think there is no interest for Lebanon or the Lebanese to enter into a conflict. I mean, they make a big deal about like Hezbollah entering the war. How much Hezbollah have forces inside Syria in the beginning? This is a large country. There's a population of 20 million people. You think a few thousand, or if there is any numbers that the opposition put, is that going to make a difference in a 20 million population? I mean, the opposition, they talk about the opposition is actually taking half of Syria. Now the opposition cannot handle few, if there is 1,000 of Hezbollah fighter. I think this is a propaganda by the opposition. Hezbollah has nothing to do inside Syria except to defend this area that under the Lebanese jurisdiction, which actually happened to be in the divided border. I think that there is a retreat in the opposition. They have to blame it on somebody. They came and blame it in Hezbollah. I think if you look at the large scale, the Lebanese, it's their interest to keep away from the Syrian crisis. Even we have 2 million Syrian in Lebanon we have to handle, and this is a large issue. I think the one who's involved are those Persian Gulf countries, the United States that had sent a military operation, the CIA, the Saudi, the Qatari, the Turkish. Those people are involved on the ground, been sending weapons and money, and if something have to be asked, ask these people to stop meddling in the business of Syria, and let's have a peace process.
Let's put some of that let's put some of that to Saleh Mubarak then. Hezbollah forces inside Syria, all propaganda coming from the opposition. What's your view?
We know it's not propaganda. We know several Hezbollah fighters were either killed or captured, not only in Al Qusayr region, but as far as Aleppo, as far as Damascus and Homs, in several places. And we have reports telling us that more than 1/3 of the fighters of Hezbollah are actually fighting inside Syria. We have about 20,000 Hezbollah fighters out of the total fighting force of 50,000. And we know that the Syrian government is desperate now for that. And the orders came to Hezbollah from outside, from Tehran directly. And we know that there is an internal conflict within Hezbollah between the political wing, Ali Fayyad, and the military wing. And people are not happy. You know, Hezbollah fighters are being killed, and this exposes the lies of their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, who always brags about the resistance with Israel and call their dead people martyrs with Israel. Now they cannot hide that the fact that those people were not killed with the enemy Israel. They were killed somewhere else, and they're calling it a jihadi mission. They're not saying where and how or anything. They're just saying a jihadi mission.
Killing innocent people in the Lebanese border is something not to,
more than 170 of those Hezbollah. And now, all of a sudden, Hezbollah remembered, they said there are Lebanese villages inside Syria, which I don't understand. 70 years after the independence from France and so on, all of a sudden remembered. If those are Shia citizens, they are Syrian citizens, and their protection is the mission of the Syrian government, not of any foreign power. Now they're blaming the opposition, the Syrian opposition, of seeking help from outside. We're not seeking any help, as the general said, of boots on the ground. But the Syrian government is the one who is actually utilizing the help from Russia and Iran.
I want to pick up on that,
Hezbollah.
actually. What Kamel Wazny touched on there earlier about all of the assistance coming from outside, from countries like Qatar. You say it's not boots on the ground, but there has been assistance in other forms, and the criticism is that this is only fueling the conflict further.
Well, first of all, the question is to me, right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Kamal, I'll let you respond in a moment.
The Free Syrian Army has said many, many times through the military leadership or the political leadership that we, the Syrian resistance, the Free Syrian Army, don't need any fighters from outside. Please do not send any fighters from outside. We need actually weapons, we need support, logistical support, communication support, all kind of support, because our weapons are only from those we gained from our battles with the Syrian regime.
All right. Kamel Wazny?
Well, obviously, we know the money and the weapon is coming from all these countries, and there's heavy involvement by these countries. And I think from the beginning, we called for dialogue, for allow the Syrian people to sit together. Those Lebanese are actually resided. There are 35,000 Lebanese live on those towns. There's over 20 towns, small towns. They've actually been there for hundreds of years. Yes, it is the responsibility of the Syrian government to protect them, but if the Syrian government been driven away from that area and the opposition is actually handing that area and came and destroyed and raped the women in that village, what should we do? Sit silent and let our women and children and houses be destroyed? Is that what you ask it? Actually, the opposition should set an example how to deal with the situation.
Or Shia?
And if you want to do something, it's not an issue of the Shiite, it's a Lebanese. I'm not saying about Shiite or Sunni. So we can kill him?
Well,
is that the answer? Is that
no?
You're contradicting Al-Nusra. Is this the philosophy you want?
Let me mention
cutting head
something
and hands
just briefly,
and torture?
Yeah, very briefly. There was a proposal by George Sabra, the leader of the coalition now, the temporary leader, that let's stop this. The Free Syrian Army will not attack the Hermel, will not fire anything. In exchange of that, you guys do not interfere. There was absolutely no response. This was passed to the highest Lebanese politicians. Please don't interrupt. It was passed to all the Lebanese leadership, including the president, including Walid Jumblat, and they tried to establish communication with Mr. Nabih Berri, but there was no answer from them. It is obvious that the orders are coming from outside. And let me remind you of one thing. The General Assembly for Hezbollah, Al-Mu'tamar Al-Am for Hezbollah, was postponed twice for the internal conflict inside Hezbollah itself.
All right, I want to let Kamel respond to that briefly, but we've got to move on.
I don't know anything about Hezbollah because I'm not a member of Hezbollah, and I don't have any comment on that situation. But I tell you, this is a Lebanese town. As a Lebanese, I am for protecting those innocent people. I am against interfering in Syrian affair. I hope that the Syrian people find a peaceful solution, because the blood that spilled in Syria and the destruction, you need 100 years because it's hundreds of billions been destroyed, and there's international players destroying your country, and you don't know what you're heading for.
I can see both of you are not going to come to any agreement on this, and I appreciate the divergence of opinion here, but we've got to move on. I want to bring in Elias Hanna and get his view on all of this. Is the outside influence in Syria just only fueling this conflict further?
I mean, when you look at the region, so let's go back from the tactical issues to the strategic issues to the macro level. When you look at Syria, it's a battleground, it's a proxy war, it's a silent war, it's the Cold War, what's happening up in the region after the American withdrawal in 2011. Here comes the major role of Hezbollah. He's one of the major strategic axes or alliance since 1982-83, Iran, Syria, and Lebanon via Hezbollah. This is like obvious thing, this like normal for Hezbollah to go and fight or maybe defend. It depends how you see it. Now, Hezbollah, the major, front would be against Israel. And the second front was created. Now in El Hermel or near Al Qusayr, this front is now institutionalized. You have a structure, you have logistics, and you have like command and control. It's something important. Hezbollah is trying to create a buffer zone for himself because, this is like Shia area, main Shia area. Second, he's trying to secure, as I said earlier, the backyard of Damascus. And moreover, he's a part of a greater and regional alliance where a silent war by proxy going into Syria. Everybody is following in Syria today a low-cost strategy. What is tactical in Syria now will determine the strategic level, what's going to happen in Syria. Yes, Qatar is helping, Saudi Arabia is helping, the Americans are helping, and as well as the Jordanian. Now what's going in Syria, nobody wants to interfere in Syria, including Hezbollah, and to say that Hezbollah have sent like 20,000 people, it's a little bit exaggerated, Maybe there is elites of Hezbollah that are fighting somewhere, someplace, for purposes, internal purposes. Now Hezbollah has two agendas, the local and the regional one. Now the balance between the two one is taking like
let's get Nicholas Harris's view on this then. As far as what are the calculations that Hezbollah will be making as far as their involvement in this conflict the longer it goes on?
Well, I think in general what you have here are two dual narratives of resistance. On the side of the Syrian opposition, you have a narrative of resistance to the al-Assad government and, by fact, Hezbollah, by resistance to the allies of the al-Assad government. In the framework of the way Hezbollah views it, I agree that they view it on one hand as a matter of local security. These villages in Qusayr region are the people, a lot of the people that are in these regions, they claim Lebanese citizenship. Some of them, a number of them are Shiites, but even Christians and some Sunni and Alawites reported to have turned through the popular committees and said, help us, we are being attacked.
That is going to have to be the last word. We've got to leave it there. I want to thank all four of our guests in Beirut, Elias Hanna and Kamel Wazni, in Washington, D.C., Nicholas Harris, and joining me here in Doha, Saleh Mubarak. And thank you for joining us. Remember, Al Jazeera has extensive coverage of what's going on in Syria, not just on this program, but with our news programs and online at aljazeera.com. I'm Hazem Seeker. Thanks for joining us.